I'm Insomniac, and this is the Tissot T-Classic Titanium.
If you feel the vibe.
Before I get into this review, I'd like to give a big shout out to Rosemary, who got me this watch towards the end of 2018. I've been wearing it ever since, so I have lots of good on the wrist experience with it. So again, a huge shout out for an awesome gift. Let's get right into the watch. The first thing to note about this case is that, just like the name implies, it's made of lightweight titanium with a simple and enjoyable split of brushed and polished finishes, brushed sides with a polished top, and if I can get it there, bottom. The perfectly round case shape has a great geometric contrast to the sides of the case, which follow the rounded shape of the dial, but are perfectly flat leading down to the bottom of the case, making the diameters of the top and bottom exactly the same, which in the case of some watches makes them feel chunky or too tall, but in this case, because of the thin profile of under 10 millimeters, gives a great presence to the watch without making it look or feel too tall. The shape, length, and angle of the lugs is excellent. They look great with the case overall and end at just the right place for a perfect, comfortable feel on the wrist. The case back is an exhibition style, so you can see the Tissot's Powermatic 80 automatic movement in action, with a decently pleasing aesthetic to the rotor. The outer edge of the case back is polished and includes various information about the watch. The crown on this piece is visually excellent. It's just the right size, shape, and aesthetic with the case, and it has an impressively raised Tissot T on it, and widely spaced but fairly grippy texturing on the outer diameter of the crown. The problem here, and where I have to subtract a point, is with the ass-backwards shape of the grooves on the crown. The raised portion of the slots is practically against the case, which makes it really hard to wind. Once it's pulled out, it's easy to manipulate for easy adjusting of the time and date, but winding it when you want to is a chore. The overall machining and quality of the case are very good. Not the best I've ever seen, but definitely a careful crafted look. At first glance, the dial on this watch is painfully plain, and pictures online really don't do it justice. The whole dial is silver, including the indices, but a closer look shows you how much time and detail actually went into this dial. The very outer edge of the dial has a super thin but very clear printed minute track. In one section further, and you have the darker silver section that has an ever so slight brushed look to the finish. Then separating that from the middle portion of the dial, you have a very thin and elegant polished ring. The center portion of the dial has a fine vertical pinstripe pattern, and in this section you'll also find the date window, which has a polished border around it with an impressive thickness and height. Speaking of impressive thickness and height, the indices on this watch for the hours are incredible. The 12 and 6 are done in a unique yet classic font, while the other indices are just straight shapes, but when you look at them closer, you'll notice that they're actually all slightly sloped, and the center of each has a tiny curve in it. Great attention to detail here. Down below the 6, you have Swiss Made printed just above that minute track. Then last but not least, we have the only part of the dial that I feel doesn't stack up to the rest in terms of quality: the brand name and model. You see Tissot 1853 there under the 12 and Powermatic 80 just above the 6. The printed font is fine, but they're on these uninspired raised flat rectangular sections just slapped on the pinstriping. I understand that those raised sections are to keep the texture uncluttered against the pinstripe pattern, but personally I think that an applied Tissot logo or the text printed right on the dial without the pinstriping would have given the dial an almost perfect aesthetic. The only complication on this watch is the date at 3 o'clock. I love its position here, not interfering with the 3 o'clock index, and even though it's black numeral on a white disc, the silver backing on this dial is super light, so it matches fairly well, and the numerals are large enough to be read easily at a glance. Time at a glance on this Tissot Titanium is very, very good. Almost perfect. And the reason I say almost perfect is because part of what makes time at a glance on a lot of watches really good or really not good is contrast. And silver on silver, which is basically what this is not a lot of contrast, but it is a darker, highly polished, and very thick silver on a nice light brushed backdrop. And even the minute track, despite the fact that it's kind of thin, that's black on that light silver. And overall, I mean, there's just no way you could look at the time on this watch and not easily be able to tell exactly what time it is. So minus one little point for contrast, which again barely makes a difference on this particular piece, the time at a glance on this watch is excellent. The bracelet on this watch is incredible. It's titanium just like the case, so it doesn't add any unnecessary weight or imbalance to the feel of this piece when it's on the wrist. One great thing about the lightweight titanium is that Tissot is able to make this bracelet nice and thick without it being heavy. It's a 5-piece link design, all brushed minus the intermediate pieces between the larger sections of the links, which are polished, which adds a beautiful, stylish break in the aesthetic of the bracelet. At the bottom you have a push-button deployant clasp, which works perfectly, and Tissot managed to make the ends almost seamless to give the bracelet a continuous look all around the wrist, and you have Tissot 1853 very lightly engraved down there, which looks good yet subtle. One of the best things about this bracelet is the size of the links. They used a smaller size link than you would see with most bracelets, which paired with the 5-piece design gives the bracelet a little bit of flex at any given point, which helps contour to the curves of your wrists perfectly. Combine that with the lightweight titanium material and what you have is a bracelet that feels weightless and just floats on the wrist. I've actually slept in this watch countless times and never even felt it. Literally the only thing I have here to subtract a point from the strap score is the fact that titanium, despite a general misconception among many watch lovers about it being scratch resistant, is actually just slightly more susceptible to scratching than steel, which means that over time, even with careful use, you will start to see little marks and scratches turn up. The MSRP on the Tissot titanium is $825. Despite the fact that it's a Swiss-made automatic that looks and feels of high quality, I'd say that's a little bit steep for this piece. But that's not what these actually sell for. As of the time of this review, I saw this watch on one retailer's site for $325. At $325, you're getting an incredible amount of watch for your dollar. You're getting a neutral styled watch, which although more of a dress watch, honestly doesn't look out of place with just about anything you wear with it, from t-shirts to full-blown suits. A Swiss-made automatic movement with 80 hours of power reserve, and of course, lightweight titanium construction. It's structurally high quality and aesthetically pleasing, so honestly at that price I have nothing bad to say about it. It's definitely a watch I could recommend you picking up, whether you actually have a collection of decent high-end watches and you just want a very high quality kind of daily wear watch. Or if you're somebody who's just getting into watches, you want your first Swiss made piece, you want something nice, something with a recognizable brand, but you don't want to spend $1,000+, this is a watch that I could definitely recommend you starting with. Definitely a great value for any watch lover, in my opinion. Well, if you'd like to see more watch reviews like this on this channel, I could certainly use some support over at Patreon, link at the top of the video description. Sign up over there. And if anybody watching this has watches you'd like to send in to be reviewed and sent back, email me at shoulditimethis@gmail.com. We will set that up, and I'll see you all at the next one.